Welcome back to another episode of the Inside Japan podcast, which is sponsored by JobsinJapan.com, the best place on the internet to find your next job in Japan. Today, I'm talking with my friend Bruno Danese, who is a coffee barista guy. He started a cafe in Hokkaido called Hokkaido. And we've been talking over in my my Facebook group on about coffee. So Bruno, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, no worries, Charlie. How are you today?
I'm awesome. I'm really excited to find out about how you started your cafe. We were talking before the podcast started about how you basically moved to Japan straight to Hokkaido, right?
Yeah, straight to Hokkaido. I saw a big opportunity in Obihiro here where I live. It's a smaller city compared to the big cities you have in Honshu, but it's a city that's thriving. It's growing still, which is very unusual in the countryside of Japan. And so there was a big opportunity in the market for a third wave coffee shop and a coffee business. So yeah, and the business is something I've been talking to my wife about for the past 10 years, I guess.
Wow.
We've had the name for a long time, for over 10 years as well. And we've been discussing the menu, the business, the concept and everything for so long. So it was really natural. It was a natural move to come to Hokkaido and open a coffee business. It's not something that we just woke up one day and we're like, hey, let's open a coffee shop.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like me, actually. I got so into coffee in the last few years, and I think that's how we met through there were a bunch of coffee groups on Facebook.
One of the groups.
Yeah. And I didn't know that you were in Japan until I think I put something up about getting coffee machines in Japan, and then that's how we got connected. And that's kind of part, maybe my dream as well, is like open a cafe or something. It would be amazing. I would love to do that. And I have the same kind of conversations with my friends about, what would you want on a coffee, like in a menu in a cafe and all those kinds of things. So it's really cool to see that you actually started that. So how did you actually go about starting the cafe in Japan? Was there anything that was really difficult about starting it? Like were there lots of regulations to go through, and how about like raising money and buying machines and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I worked as a manager in a coffee shop in Australia. So I had a little bit of experience with that. And the regulations actually for a cafe, the regulations are very similar. All the little sanitizing corners and sinks and all the little small things are very, very similar. I think all around the world, most health departments have very similar codes. So that wasn't too hard.
I'm also curious about how much money it costs to start a cafe, because a lot of people, I'm sure, in our audience are interested in starting their own businesses, and it can be difficult, I think, to raise enough capital to start something like even a cafe. You'd think, okay, well, a cafe is not that, you just got to get the coffee shop and the location and the machines, and then you're good to go. And it's like, well, there's actually a lot of stuff that goes into making a coffee shop. Yeah,
and I think more than having money to buy equipment, you need to have money to survive the first few years, because it does take time for your business to start building a big enough customer base so that you have a constant flow of money and revenue coming. And that's what a lot of people misunderstand. They go like, oh yeah, I'm gonna open a cafe and we're gonna have this line of people outside coming in and revenue is just gonna roll in. And it's not like that. You need time. Word of mouth takes time. Even with social media and everything, you need to have that cushion of basically money that you can burn through in the first few years. And I've seen so many businesses just run out of cash because they put everything into the business. And instead of opening, let's say, a small or medium-sized cafe, they went all out, spent $1 million opening a cafe, expecting to have hundreds of people lining up every morning for a cup of coffee. And in my opinion, that's the most important part of the business, is having a cushion, no matter the size of the business. I could tell you exactly how much everything costs here, but it depends on the location and the situation.
Right.
The most important thing is having a cushion that you can lean on while you build your brand and build awareness. And I think that's the most important part of the business.
Right. And you've got to be careful what you start off with as well. I know a guy who started a cafe here in Tokyo, and I'm sure Hokkaido and Tokyo, in terms of even just the real estate alone, the difference in terms of how much things cost is astronomical. Like the one
Very
that I
different.
talked to, yeah, he's in Kichijoji, which is already kind of a oshare kind of part of town.
Yeah,
And it was a little bit far away from the station. And I think the pandemic really just completely knocked out his business. And it's really sad because the guy was super passionate about coffee. He made some of the best espresso I've ever had. Like I used to just like, even though it was a little bit further from the station, I'd walk the extra way just to get a really nice espresso because this guy cared about it. And I think he was able to stay open for a little bit longer because he also roasted coffee to sell to other cafes. So he
yeah,
was also trying to diversify, like not just selling coffees to people coming in the door, but also trying to like roast coffee for other cafes as well.
yeah.
So did you have any trouble when the pandemic came around? Was that difficult for your business, or how did that
Actually,
work for you?
I think because I'm in a smaller city that's less dependent on tourism, and I think not as dependent on outsiders. Uh, Actually, I have to be really thankful. But the pandemic actually, man, our business just boomed.
Really? That's super
Uh,
interesting. Why do you think that was?
I even have. It's even weird. It's I almost have a little bit of guilt,
Yeah.
seeing all these businesses collapsing, and we are like, growing, employing people, and expanding.
Yeah.
It even feels unnatural.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like you don't want to feel like you're bucking the curve when, especially when people are kind of suffering and struggling. But it's not, it's good to know that there are some businesses that are still doing okay out there, because I know it's been tough for everyone. Like I I felt the same thing like when I started doing my YouTube channel seriously last year. It started to grow, and I think it's because everyone was staying inside and watching more YouTube, right?
Yeah,
So the number of people watching my videos went through the roof from around March or April last year,
yeah,
and that kind of helped me build my coffee channel. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Like I know it sucked for a lot of people, and I didn't enjoy the pandemic at all. When I was a teacher at the time,
yeah,
but at least like there are some things that have changed for the better. I think especially in Tokyo, some people are able to do more working from home because people have now been exposed to that idea. And before
yeah.
that, people were just like,
Uh,
working at home, what is that? We don't do that in Japan, and now it's
Not
something that everyone can do.
we've always tried to focus the business on the local community more than foreigners, or when I mean foreigners, I mean foreigners from outside of the city, tourists, in that sense.
Mm.
Yeah, a lot of business like cafes, restaurants, and stuff. They try to focus so much on tourists that they forget to actually appreciate their local community. And in a pandemic like this, tourists will stop coming, but your local community will continue to support you if you support them.
Mm.
And that's something we've always done here since the beginning. We've done a lot of free events for schools, like teaching events, lectures, and coffee seminars and things like that in the local community. And I think that definitely helped us a little bit because you
Mm.
have that appreciation from the community.
Is that part of the reason why you decided to go and start your cafe in Hokkaido? Because I know people trying to start businesses in Tokyo, it can feel very impersonal. Like there's this kind of culture here that's a little bit like everyone's got their own bubble, their own like bubble
Yeah,
around them, what they're doing, where they're going, and how much work they have to do to survive in this city, to pay their rent. Hokkaido, like I've never been before. I'd love to come and visit sometime, but it definitely I think there's no chance that it's more stressful than Tokyo. It's I'm sure it's a very much more relaxed place. So is that part of the
much
reason
more
why you
relaxed.
chose to be there?
It's one of the main reasons. Yes,
Mm.
definitely. Every customer is a person here, not just a number.
Yeah.
A number through the door.
Oh, there
And
are
yeah,
some
we
places in Tokyo that actually have number systems where you pick up a number as soon as you come in the door. It's like
yeah,
it's yeah, I think I definitely agree with you. Like my sister has a cafe in the UK. It's a big coffee family,
yeah,
and her cafe is in the countryside, and so every person who comes in through the door, they're on first name basis with my sister.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really important. You build this relationship with your customers, even if you don't know every single person's names. They know you. You allow them to know a little bit about you, and it feels
Mm.
more personal. And also, you mentioned Tokyo, for example. Opening a cafe in Tokyo, you just become another cafe, another coffee shop. But here in a smaller city, you become the coffee shop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the place that people go to hang out. Like I'm sure you get this
Exactly.
from being a coffee person, but there's that
Like
concept.
on the weekends, we have people driving 100 kilometers just to come and have a cup of coffee here. Because there isn't anything around like this.
Wow. That's crazy. I could never imagine driving. I mean, actually, that's not true. I have actually driven really far to go to. There was a coffee place in Osaka that the guy had barrel aged coffee. I don't know if you saw this on the news or if you saw the video that I did on my channel.
A teaspoon was.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you paid. $100.
That's the place. Yeah, it was 2,000 yen for 1 teaspoon of coffee.
Okay, $2,000. 2,000 yen. Yeah. Okay.
$2,000 would be a little bit much, but 2,000 yen, yeah. So $20 US for a teaspoon of coffee, and it kind of tasted like coffee flavored balsamic vinegar. You know, like it was really, but it was so rich. It was really, really good. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I was really impressed. And the guy, I think the guy's been on Japanese TV a bunch of times, you know, and very interesting guy as well. Like I don't know, he talked a lot about himself as well. He was kind of a fun guy. So yeah, I would drive far for a really good cup of coffee. And I'm sure like that's a good part about being a local coffee place for you, is that you get to have those kind of relationships, like people have actually come for you rather than just like, okay, I need my caffeine for the day.
Exactly. And I think most of our customers come here for the experience and just to have a quick break and grab a cup of coffee and just break the routine a little bit, more so than the actual caffeine.
Have you learned anything about customer service from doing this in Japan? Because I know, coming from somewhere like the West, you know, Australia, I think it's quite similar to the UK. The customer service is a lot more varied, right? Like it's hit and miss. You might get like a really nice barista one place, and then another place you just get a guy who's just like, you know, pouring your coffee and doesn't like his job very much. So have you learned much from how Japanese people kind of approach customer service?
I think they have the expectation of appreciation from the place they're going to. So you have the typical welcoming things that you say when they come in, and the arigato gozaimasu at the end as well. It's very, very important. I think that's something I learned very quickly. I had to do. But also, you mentioned a little bit about customers. They're not very different or any different at all to customers in Australia or in Brazil. They just expect to pay for something and to get something nice, worth the money that they're paying for. But one thing I noticed is, I think Japanese people are more satisfied with getting what the shop wants to serve. Whereas in Australia, for example, I worked many years in Australia serving coffee as well. Everybody wants to tweak their drink. No one's happy with a standard latte. They want a latte. They want a half strength almond milk, little bit of cream, little bit of vanilla, little bit of caramel, all these little things, you know what I mean? And here it's more like, hey, give me a latte and make it the way you want to make it.
I think, but that's a good thing though, I think, in a way, because it's a kind of trust that you give to someone who knows their craft, right? Like that, you know a lot about coffee, you've studied all of this stuff. So when they go to a place and they ask for like, okay, what's on the menu that's, you know, something that's good, like they know that you've prepared the coffee well, you've got your nice roaster behind there. For the people who are listening on the podcast version, check the video version out. There's a beautiful Mill City roaster behind him, and yeah, so it's like you've developed this craft, you know how to do this well. So when they ask you for the thing that they want, they trust that you're actually the professional, you know how to prepare this in the best way. So exactly. I kind of like that. Yeah,
there is this trust in Japan. For example, for me it's really weird, but a lot of people call me the master in Japan. They come in, hello master. It feels really weird, but I got used to it already. But it still feels a little bit weird, actually. Yeah, you know, being called the master.
Well, it's an interesting thing in Japan that someone told me that the term sensei has a lot more meaning here than what we would translate it as teacher. So
much more, yeah. It's
so
much deeper than just teacher.
Absolutely. I think it means something like the person who's walked the path before.
Yeah.
And there's a certain kind of level of respect and deference, which is kind of like why doctors also get called sensei in Japan. It's not just someone who works as a teacher. It's someone who's
It's someone,
learned.
I guess, who cares about the craft.
Mm, right.
Craftsman. Yeah, almost.
Yeah, right. And
Almost
I
takumi. I
what
think
sorry?
the word in Japanese, I think it's almost like it's the sensei and takumi, the
Takumi.
craftsman. Yeah.
Right, right. And yeah, so and it's interesting because of being in the coffee group together, if I ask a question about something, it seems like you often reply with something that's like, about that thing in depth before I ask, even something that I would think would be quite obscure. So I think that's a really important thing is the more time you spend doing one thing. I think this is also a very important part of Japanese culture, is that they really prioritize doing one thing for a long time so you can really understand it in depth, as opposed to kind of like necessarily maybe more my approach, which I'm quite a generalist in a lot of things. I learn about
Right.
something, I get to the point where there's diminishing returns, and then I kind of go, okay, what's next? I want to learn something quickly and learn like, a great deal about it, like maybe more than 95% of people know about that topic. And then I just go, okay, what's next? But
Right.
how long have you been doing this, the coffee shop, and how long have you been working not only in Hokkaido, but in Australia before that?
So in the coffee industry, I've been involved in the coffee industry for 12 years already.
Mm-hmm.
So managing cafe in Australia, and then our shop here is just turned 5 years already.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying the conversation, and I just want to take a quick moment to mention that this podcast is only possible because of the support of JobsinJapan.com. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com. There are tons of jobs on there, not only in English teaching, but also software engineering, hospitality, marketing and consulting, among many others. Most of the jobs on the board do not require any specific level of Japanese, and you can get started in minutes. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com, and let's get back to the conversation.
What have you learned about not only starting a business in Japan, like in terms of what you need to do to start up, but like maybe some of the difficulties that foreigners might face starting a business in Japan? Because I know for some foreigners it can be a little bit difficult. They might feel like the deck is stacked against them, but you're obviously doing really well. Like, what have you learned about that in the last 5 years?
I think the hardest thing is not so much the language barrier, but more of the cultural barriers. It's trying to convey your expectation for the business, trying to make people understand what your image is a Japanese term, but what your concept is. It's really hard to explain and to have them understand what it is, because they have preconceived ideas of what a cafe should be. The Japanese kisaten, it should be a master there brewing the coffee in front of everyone with a little counter, people smoking, and that's the idea of a coffee shop, especially in a small city like the one I live in. So it was really hard to explain the concept to especially the builders and everybody that was involved in building and designing the shop. For them, it was really difficult to understand how this was going to work. All these even takeaway drinks here, it was unheard of in the city.
That's
And
interesting.
they couldn't understand this.
Yeah, because like I can see the roaster behind you, but I can also hear a little bit of some noises, like maybe the people in the cafe. So is this the kind of cafe where the roaster is sort of behind a window or something that people can see what you're doing?
No, actually, we keep the roaster in the back here because unfortunately there's a lot of kids that come and start touching things and things like that. So we just prefer to keep our baby tucked in a secret room in the back.
I totally understand that. I'm often afraid when I have friends over to my place that they want to like play with my coffee machine, and I'm like, well, it's dangerous as well. Like it gets really hot.
Exactly.
If they touch the steam wand after it's been used, like that could be a burn. So you don't want to take that kind of risk. So what are some things that you would recommend for people who want to start a business here that isn't an English school? Because a lot of people want to start an English school, but you've started a cafe. Like, what were some things that you needed to learn in order for that to be a success?
I think the most important thing is having a solid plan. How you're going to start your business, how you're going to grow it, but also how you're going to deal with lack of growth in the beginning. A lot of people open a business, like I mentioned before, and they expect instantaneous growth. And you have to take it easy in the beginning. You have to focus on your local community, training your employees slowly and correctly. And also you need, in my opinion, you need to have experience to open a business. You know, I worked in cafes in Australia, so I knew at least how they worked. I didn't own a cafe before, but I knew how they worked from the inside. I see a lot of people going to open restaurants or hospitality businesses, and they just go open it, and they've never actually worked at one of those places, so they don't know exactly what problems they're going to be facing in the future.
Yeah, there's definitely a thing about being a product person. And this is maybe something that I need to consider for when I start a business or I start a cafe, is that I'm really a product person. I'm interested in the product itself. So about coffee, like I'm interested in the machinery and in the process of making it. And I'm interested in business as well, but I'm not necessarily like I've never worked in a cafe before, apart from helping my sister out in the summer holidays or something. So being able to understand, like you said, the kinds of problems that will show up are not necessarily things that you would expect just from first principles. Like you really have to have those kind of experiences and go like, wow, this is actually a huge problem if we don't deal with it up front. So I definitely agree with that. Yeah. What other things would you recommend for people starting a business? Because it's not only about the product itself. Like you said, building a community, like that's a really difficult and important part of it. How do you, especially as a foreigner, how do you do
the most important thing is, businesses are all about people. You're selling to people, and you can have the best roaster, the best coffee machine, the best coffee in the world, but if you don't have people skills, you're going to struggle, because they're going to think you're a jerk. They're going to think you're, it's hard. You need to know your stuff, but you don't have to rub it on everyone's face.
Yeah, that's where the snobby coffee connoisseur image comes from. And I've definitely felt that a few places in Tokyo. Like there are some people who really love coffee, but they come across as very rude. I'm thinking of one cafe in particular. I don't want to say which one, but like they make some of the best espresso in Tokyo for sure. But why would I want to go there when they're very rude? And I'm like, hey, like I'm curious, like because I'm into coffee. I'm looking behind the counter and I'm watching, and they're like, just go sit down, we'll bring you the coffee. I'm like, whoa, like they're kind of snobby and rude, and so I haven't been back there for a long time. So even though their coffee's great,
instead, in this case, if you're standing next to the machine, I would go, hey, look, this, I don't know how much you know as a customer. Not obviously, Charlie, as a person, I know that you know a lot about coffee, but if you were a customer, I'll go, hey, this is my coffee grinder, I'm grinding coffee here, we're gonna measure how much coffee we're grinding, then we're gonna temp, I talk the person through the espresso extraction, and then serve them the espresso. It's an opportunity. Every personal interaction is an opportunity to exchange a little bit of knowledge, not only from me, but also from them. Maybe they know a little bit about coffee that they want to share as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you said that the cultural context is one of the more difficult parts of it, but do you have to really be able to speak Japanese to a high level in order to survive in business in Japan?
Honestly, you don't.
Interesting.
No.
Why is that?
When I opened the cafe, man, my Japanese was so bad.
So how do you get by? Like I mean, obviously you can just learn some basic things as a barista. You can, just arigato gozaimasu and gochumon, itadakimasu ka or something. You can say those kinds of words, but then if they even have like a slight change in what they ask you and you don't know the phrase, you just like get lost. So what do you do about that?
I think from living already in Australia, which when I arrived in Australia, I also didn't speak any English. And I had to just get by, by using signs and just trying. I just had to communicate. I had no choice. And in Japan, it was the same thing, especially when I opened the business as well. You just learn to communicate, and also by having that experience of dealing with customers before, I knew what they were trying to say. You can almost read what a customer wants to say You can tell what they're gonna say before they say it.
Yeah.
Just by the way they walk towards the table, you know if they're not happy with the table they've been given. You know, you can tell so much by the way they slide the door open. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can.
And I think that's more important than saying, hey, I speak Japanese, I have business level Japanese, or I can read 2,000 kanjis. You know.
Yeah, I know quite a lot of people who have studied Japanese very hard, like either gone to university or they came here and they studied super hard and got their JLPT N2 or N1. And some of them, when it's interesting, I've met some people who have like N3 or N2 in Japanese, which is quite a high level in terms of what you need to be able to understand. I think N3 is something like 500 or 600 kanji. N2 is about 1,000 or 1,200 or something like that. And you have to, that's a lot to learn. That's really, really a lot. But then when I hear them speak, like their speaking doesn't sound very confident. They don't have a very good accent when they speak in Japanese. It's like, you can tell, like if you spoke to them on the phone,
the words don't come naturally.
Yeah, and I think maybe because in their head they might be translating between English and Japanese, and
right.
And maybe they don't feel confident.
Overcomplicating. They're trying to find the most complicated way of saying things rather than saying things naturally.
Yeah, and I'm probably not the best person to talk about this. I had another podcast which I think people should listen to with my friend Martin, who is a language genius, and he's really, really good at it. And he basically sounds like a native in Japanese, but the way he studied it was very different. Like he really studied it by how kind of like the way that you would as a child, like you'd watch other people and listen to other people and then try and say a few things, and then if people don't understand you, like just keep going and keep talking to people and look for every opportunity to have those kind of like interpersonal communications rather than studying from a textbook, which is how you end up with that, like the person who sounds like a textbook,
Exactly. And it's similar to the way I learned English and Japanese as well. I never actually sat down to study Japanese, or my English I had to because I was at university, but with Japanese, I've never sat down to, go through kanji and all that kind of stuff. I just learned just by working every day and chatting to people, chatting to my employees, going out and just living in the country. You know what I mean? I lived in Japan. I don't try to be in Japan, but live in a foreign bubble, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I've met a lot of people who do that. I think most of my friends are Japanese, but I do have a lot of American friends too, and a few of them do kind of insulate themselves, which is it's like why come to Japan if you don't want to live here?
Exactly. Yeah, so many people coming and all they do is complain about the lack of foreign things here. Like, oh my God, I can't get my favorite cereal. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
You have to adapt. Yeah. Every day it will present you with something that is different, and you're gonna have to adapt.
Yeah, and I basically stopped eating cereal. It was really hard for me actually because I love cereal, but I stopped eating cereal when I came to Japan. And actually I lost a lot of weight because cereal is mostly sugar. It's not good for you. And so I just started having I started learning to cook Japanese breakfasts, and I would make like what's it called? The tamagoyaki, like how to fry the egg and roll it in the square pan. And like I started to like natto. I never believe the first time I tried natto, it was the worst. I didn't like it at all. But I actually learned to really like natto. I add like some extra stuff to it. Like one of the things I like to add to it is pickled beetroot. It sounds so strange, but it adds like a sweetness to it that makes it really, really nice. So I have that with like some pickled beetroot and then a tamago kake, like with a raw egg on top, and then maybe some cubed cheese or something, and it melts into the natto and makes it even more. Oh, it's so good. It's amazing. I can see your face right now.
No, natto is something I don't think I'll ever be able to handle.
Well, your wife is Japanese, right? So do you communicate much in Japanese, or she speaks English really well? How did you meet her?
Mainly English.
Did you meet in Australia, or did you meet
in Australia?
Oh, okay. So was that a decision that you kind of came to after meeting in Australia? You were like, okay, let's go to Japan.
No, it wasn't as easy. I actually wanted to stay in Australia, but one time we came here on holidays. It was like, a meet and greet, the family thingy. And I stayed a whole month here in Japan, just trying to see how the country worked, what it was all about. And after spending a whole month in Hokkaido, I thought, okay, I can see myself living here, and I have no problems with harsh winter. Because man, the winter in Hokkaido is harsh. Like, and I had no problems with that at all. I actually came during the winter, and I studied a little bit about the city. I researched about the city, the population, the growth, economical situation of the city, to see if it was possible to open up a business, a new business here. And I also, while in Australia, still researched a lot about the Japanese coffee culture and the trends in Japan, just to see if it was something that would be possible here, and to kind of predict how customers would react to a business like ours. And yeah, now that I'm saying these things, I studied a lot about Japan without studying Japanese, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting, because I also remember when I first came to Japan, I had all of these preconceptions about what Japan would be like. And I thought, I'm going to learn Japanese in it like a couple of years, and I'll be perfect in Japanese, and I'll get a job. You know, I kind of had a positive view of the culture in general. And I think it's so interesting. Like, the things that I thought I would really like, I don't. And then a lot of the things that I didn't know about or didn't think that I would like, I actually really love about Japan. Like, one of the things I love about Japan so much is the kind of interesting connection between nature and then the city. So in Japan, and you'd see this in Tokyo, is you'll walk down a street and there's like all of these, you know, shops and neon signs everywhere. And then there'll be this shrine that's been there for, you know, 100 years or whatever. And it's like right in the middle of a really busy populated urban area. And there's this like really large shrine, you know, not a small, like little, just a tori or something and some small thing. It's a huge place where, you know, hundreds of people could go. And so I love that. I love that kind of like that Japan stays really connected with its roots. I think it's a really important thing.
And I agree with you. It's one of those things that really, I don't know. It is an interesting thing. You know, a lot of countries move on really quickly, and they kind of forget the roots. But Japan kind of has this modern thing,
like fusion
with, you know, the more modern things, modern way of life with the old, shrines and all the old culture still very much present in Japanese life.
Yeah, I love that too. Bruno, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you if they're interested in finding out more about your cafe, maybe coming to visit, or the your coffee business?
Yeah, I guess if you go to our website, www.hoccino.com. So that's HOCCINO.
Yeah, it's it's like I think you told me before that it's the Chino comes from cappuccino, and the Ho is your wife's family name.
Yes, yeah, we back in Australia when we were at university, I had a little coffee machine at home, and she used to ask me for a cappuccino every morning, but it was a special way of making a cappuccino, so she used to call it a hoccino, and we kept the name and named our coffee business after it.
That's really cute. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bruno.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Looking forward to chatting with you again.